Hello all! Today we're going to be learning about how to use the Pygame module in Python. The Pygame module allows you to write and program video games in Python, which is super fun and super awesome. And Pygame is an amazing library. It's very, very basic. Not that it's easy to learn. It can accomplish a lot, but uh, it's um, it's very fundamental and a lot less advanced than something like Unity or Unreal Engine. But it is very good to learn as a beginner, not because it's easy, but because it is very fundamental and gets you down to the root of what video games are and how they work. So, we're going to start uh, by creating this Pong game. This it's not going to look exactly like this, but this is what we're going for. If you ever played Pong before, it's super fun, uh, and yeah, it's you just try to get the ball past your opponent like that. So we're going to create this with REPL.it. So we can go to this website and click Start Coding. If you're not using REPL.it, that's also fine. It shouldn't be that much different if you're using a text editor normally. So we are going to be writing this in Python. So you would think we would make a Python REPL, but we're actually going to be making a Pygame REPL when we select what language we're doing this in. Usually you wouldn't have to do this in a normal text editor, but REPL.it is kind of weird in how it does stuff. So we're going to select Pygame, and we're going to create this REPL. Okay, so a general overview of the REPL.it user interface. So right here we have all of our files right now. All we have is main.py because that's all we have. We only have this Python file. And here is where we can write code in our Python file. So I can just write any code I want to just in here, and I can run it with this run button. When we run our video game, it will appear here. So this is where we will be able to see our video game and actually play our video game too. And here is the console. Console is where we can see error messages. We can also print stuff out to the console too, and to test things. So, everyone wants to start coding, but we need to learn some theory first. Oops. Okay, so Pygame. So this is Pygame, and this is how it works. And this is also how every video game works. So just as an example, so if you're writing some code to create this video game, say you want to check if the up arrow is being pressed. And if it's being pressed, you want to move the platform up, like you might want to do in Pong. So you would write something like this. I'm writing pseudocode right now, so it's you'll be able to understand it easily. So if up arrow is pressed, oops. If the up arrow is being pressed, then you move the platform up. So, this is perfectly valid code. If you ran this code, and it would check if the up arrow was being pressed, and if it was, it would move the platform up. But the problem with this is code is executed from top to bottom, and it's executed once, like you're reading a book. So, your interpreter will just execute this first line of code, then it will execute this second line of code, and then it'll just say, I'm done. I did what you told me to. I checked if the up arrow is being pressed, and I executed the corresponding commands, whether or not it was pressed. But what we want it to do is we want it to continuously check it. You want it to check over and over and over again if the up arrow is pressed, and so we want this piece of code to execute over and over and over again. So what we can do is we can create our game loop. So every single video game has a game loop, and this is how it works. So it's a bunch of code, and at the end of the code, it just says loop back up to the top. So we can, with just as an example with this right here, it would check if the up arrow is pressed, and if it is, then move the platform up, and then it'll do that again. Check if it's pressed. If it is, move the platform up, again and again and again, and that is how all video games work. By with the game loop, it's executing the same code over and over and over again. And we'll be making a game loop when we start programming, which is pretty soon. But if you've ever played video games before, you may know something such as frames per second. Frames per second. So this is just how many pictures get printed on your screen per second. And it's usually a measure of how good your computer is. The more frames per second, the better your computer is. The more frames per second, the better the experience is. So this is how many times the frame is drawn per second, how many loops you get per second. How many loops? That sound familiar? How many loops? How many game loops you can get per second. It's all about the loop. So, so if you have a frame rate like 60 for your video games, you have 60 frames per second for your video game, that means you're getting 60 loops per second on your game loop. And I'll see you in the next tutorial.